In the heart of cities that were once symbols of the American dream, even the police now hesitate to enter. This is no longer a distant warning, the crisis has already begun. It hasn't erupted in remote rural areas but right in the core of America's most populous and prosperous urban centers. When streets turn into encampments, subway stations become makeshift shelters, and law enforcement watches from the sidelines, the uncomfortable truth we've long avoided is now out in the open. This video takes you through the 10 largest cities in America, not to marvel at their sparkling skylines, but to confront the deepening shadows. We'll visit the so-called forbidden zones, areas where police enter only after casualties are reported, and where hope lies buried beneath layers of garbage and despair. What's happening in the top city on this list will shock you. A place where even the justice system has seemingly surrendered. Our goal here is not to criticize individuals or institutions, but to analyze and raise awareness about the current state of our urban communities. Keep watching until the end. What's happening in America right now might surprise you. Let's begin. San Francisco, the most expensive city in the US, charges over $3,000 per month for a modest rental room, and yet, right outside billion-dollar tech buildings, people are found huddled on the sidewalks. Once a beacon of progress, marked by the Golden Gate Bridge, thriving startups, and a powerful spirit of freedom, San Francisco now paints a stark contrast, especially in the Tenderloin district. Just a few blocks away from prosperity, that idealism fades. A place once associated with new beginnings has become a graveyard for broken dreams. In Tenderloin, scenes that defy belief unfold daily. A man moaning in pain at a busy intersection. A woman collapsed beside a brightly lit billboard, and the familiar tunes of street musicians replaced by the chilling sounds of the night. As of 2023, more than 7,000 homeless individuals live on San Francisco's streets. Nearly 40% of them once had stable employment. A retired couple living just 2 blocks from Tenderloin shared, "We used to take our grandchild to the park in the afternoon. Now, we keep the windows shut and never leave home after 6 p.m. Are you like that? Do you feel safe walking downtown after rush hour? Have you ever lived in or visited San Francisco? What's changed, in your opinion?" Shockingly, even the police are hesitant to patrol these areas. One officer, speaking anonymously, said, "We only go in if there are casualties, and we always enter in pairs." That admission alarmed many. If even armed officers feel unsafe, what hope remains for everyday citizens? Tenderloin today resembles a no-man's land where justice stands outside the fence, and no one dares to take responsibility. The crisis isn't just about statistics or news headlines. It lies in the growing numbness, in how people have become desensitized to the pain. When suffering becomes routine, even compassion begins to fade. Still, in Tenderloin, glimmers of humanity persist. Small volunteer groups continue to provide hot meals to the homeless every evening. Ordinary individuals like you are keeping hope alive, even if only through small acts of kindness. But if you think Tenderloin is America's most dangerous place, wait until you see Skid Row, an area even the police call a separate nation. Before we continue, if you've witnessed or experienced something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice could help spark change. Los Angeles, once the epitome of glamour, home to Malibu, the Walk of Fame, and soaring Hollywood dreams, now contains a grim reality just minutes from its shining landmarks. Skid Row, only one intersection away from luxury, is where over 75,000 homeless people live, as reported in 2023. Hundreds of tents are clustered tightly together, forming a miniature city. Each morning, long lines of people wait for free meals, while others lie motionless from a cold night, some never waking again. What shocks many is that Skid Row now has its own community-run security force. Due to safety concerns, regular police patrols have diminished significantly. This development raises a disturbing question. Is there now a lawless nation operating not on a remote island, but within the heart of one of the world's most iconic cities? Residents just blocks away from Skid Row have had to adjust their lives drastically. No more evening strolls. No more kids playing outside. The fear that the disorder could spill over keeps families behind locked doors. Have you ever lived in Los Angeles? What are your memories? Would you return if nothing changes? If a city as wealthy, vibrant, and well known as Los Angeles cannot solve its housing crisis, what happens when smaller cities face the same wave? Is homelessness now not just an urban issue but a reflection of systemic collapse? Amid the chaos, there are still flickers of kindness. At the edge of Skid Row, a small church offers free showers weekly. A 72-year-old volunteer gives haircuts, distributes clothing, and listens to those with no one else left. The hope may be small, but it's that very hope that keeps humanity alive in places like this. Many may have abandoned Skid Row, but in the next city, despair doesn't hide. It screams through the streets, shatters storefront windows, and renders entire commercial districts inaccessible. Welcome to Portland. Once hailed as a peaceful paradise, now dubbed Zombie City. Few could have imagined that the city once considered America's cleanest, greenest, and most livable would come to resemble a real-life version of The Walking Dead. Portland was famous for its tree-lined streets, bicycles outnumbering cars, and a strong sense of community. Today, people walk through downtown with cautious, downcast eyes, avoiding those speaking to themselves in the streets. From an artsy, handcrafted city full of charm, Portland now seems like a place where reality has unraveled. An elderly woman living in the Pearl District, once Portland's pride, said, "I used to walk my grandchild every morning. Now, we only walk in the apartment hallway." Her anxiety is not just for herself, but for an entire generation growing up amid fear and instability. From 2022 to 2025, homelessness in Portland has risen by over 50%. Nearly 80% of these individuals live outdoors without any permanent shelter. Scenes across the city are deeply unsettling. Someone setting up a tent in the middle of a road, a woman trembling in a sleeping bag at a bus stop, and haunting laughter echoing through the night. In 2024 alone, more than 2,600 businesses either closed or left Portland's downtown, according to the local trade association. The economy wasn't the only factor. Many customers were simply too afraid to venture out due to rising public disorder. When businesses disappear, they take more than jobs. They take security, light, and optimism. Are we beginning to normalize the unacceptable? Is turning away from suffering making things worse? When society looks the other way, the people most in need become invisible, and in that process, the city slowly loses its soul. Have you ever visited Portland? Has your view of it changed over the past 5 or 10 years? What do you think can bring it back to life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Before we continue to the next city, a place sometimes no longer even recognized by its own police force and home to over 60,000 homeless individuals, take a moment. What you're about to witness in Seattle may leave you speechless. If you've found what we've covered so far moving, hit the bell icon and subscribe so you won't miss our future videos. Let's head to Seattle. Capitol Hill. Once the most vibrant part of Seattle and a hub for artists, entrepreneurs, and students, is now known by residents as the lawless gray zone. It's a place where anything might happen, and where very little is guaranteed. Seattle was once a symbol of the Northwest tech brilliance, home to global giants and a seamless blend of urban life and nature. But today, in Capitol Hill, few feel safe walking after sunset. Each sidewalk has been overtaken, not by neighbors, but by tents, heaps of trash, and empty stairwells. What was once called the city's living room is now a cold, locked-away corner no one wants to open. Walking through Seattle, you might witness scenes that seem unreal. People using drugs openly at bus stops, sidewalks once alive with music now occupied by those lost in confusion. Many local businesses have posted signs saying, "temporarily closed due to safety concerns." According to the King County Health Department, nearly 70% of Capitol Hill in downtown Seattle is currently impacted by homelessness and substance abuse. Some areas are no longer even on the police's standard patrol routes unless a serious incident occurs. A local delivery driver confessed that he never turns off his engine or locks his doors. Even when stepping away for a minute, the risk is too high. How can this be happening in a city with a GDP nearing $500 billion? These neighborhoods have become justice blind spots, places abandoned not only by policy but by presence. If Seattle's current state alarms you, wait until we visit the next city, where drug addicts collapse like zombies in broad daylight and the police describe the region as a maze with no exit. Welcome to Philadelphia, specifically the Kensington district. But it's no longer known for admiration. Instead, many locals now call it a humanitarian blind spot. Here, people slump on the sidewalks, and passers-by don't even pause. They've seen it all too often. Kensington once thrived as a bustling industrial hub in the Northeast, where the clang of steel and the laughter of laboring families filled the air. But when the factories closed, the neighborhood slowly began to collapse. A city that once fueled dreams now gasps for breath. Today, walking through the streets of Kensington presents an unforgettable and heartbreaking reality. You might see someone curled up on the pavement, unmoving. Another sits dazed in a wheelchair, staring blankly at nothing, surrounded by litter and the shadows of forgotten lives. The environment feels post-apocalyptic, broken sidewalks, boarded-up storefronts, and the faint sounds of sirens constantly echoing in the distance. Kensington Avenue, once a main thoroughfare of commerce and movement, is now marked by drug use in broad daylight, with many individuals injecting themselves openly or slumped over in unnatural positions, seemingly lifeless. Residents say it's not unusual to see bodies lying motionless in the street, unresponsive, and without anyone stopping to check if they're still alive. According to 2023 data from the Philadelphia Office of Homeless Services, the city's homeless population exceeds 6,000, but in Kensington alone, the concentration of visible suffering is staggering. A significant number of these individuals are addicted to synthetic opioids like fentanyl or xylazine, a veterinary sedative that's increasingly mixed with street drugs, earning the neighborhood the nickname, Trank Alley, among health workers and locals. What's more haunting is the normalization of it all. Children on their way to school pass by unconscious bodies. Local shop owners clean needles off their doorsteps each morning. A mother who has lived in the area for 30 years shared, "I used to let my kids play outside. Now, I won't even let them walk to the corner store." Law enforcement presence in Kensington has declined sharply in recent years. Officers are overwhelmed and often under-resourced to handle the volume of emergency calls. Some streets are rarely patrolled unless there is a violent crime or overdose-related death. And even then, response times are slower than ever. An officer interviewed by a local journalist confessed, "It feels like we've lost control of parts of this city. There are places even we don't want to go unless we absolutely have to." Community groups and outreach volunteers still try to make a difference. Mobile clinics, food distribution tents, and church-run recovery programs provide daily aid, even if only in small ways. But these grassroots efforts face overwhelming odds. Nonprofits struggle for funding, and many are forced to shut down or scale back services just as demand increases. But the bigger question looms. How did a place like this, once part of the American industrial backbone, end up like this? And more importantly, if this is the current reality in Philadelphia, what does the future hold for other cities on a similar path? The city's administration continues to propose initiatives, but real change feels slow and insufficient. Residents are left asking, how much worse does it have to get before it gets better? Kensington is not just a cautionary tale. It's a visible sign of a system cracking under pressure. It's no longer enough to say, "This is unfortunate," and move on. At some point, indifference becomes complicity. Have you been to Kensington? Have you seen this with your own eyes? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments, because change begins with awareness. But if you think Kensington is where the story ends, it's not. The next city will take you even deeper into this crisis. A place where the problem isn't just visible, it's actively growing. Stay with us, as we explore the next urban battlefield where homelessness, addiction, and collapse are reaching a boiling point. Welcome to Chicago, once a proud symbol of resilience, commerce, and architectural brilliance. A city known for its iconic skyline, deep dish pizza, and the historic heartbeat of the Midwest. But today, it is also home to neighborhoods plagued by extreme poverty, rampant gun violence, and a growing homeless population. What was once the city that works is now struggling just to keep its systems functioning. Downtown Chicago still boasts bustling business districts and gleaming high-rises. But just a few train stops away, the contrast is jarring. In places like the West Side and parts of the South Side, boarded-up homes, crumbling infrastructure, and food deserts stretch across entire zip codes. In these forgotten corners, it's not unusual to hear gunfire echoing through the night or to see tents under bridges and makeshift shelters in public parks. According to 2024 reports by the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, over 68,000 people experience homelessness annually in the city. A number that includes not just those on the streets, but thousands living in unstable housing, cars, or temporary accommodations. While some shelters exist, they are often overwhelmed, underfunded, and unable to meet the growing need. Many people simply give up trying to find help, preferring to take their chances sleeping in alleyways or on subway platforms. A school teacher working on the West Side said, "I've lost students to shootings and to drugs. Some come to school hungry, wearing the same clothes for days. How can they focus on learning when survival is the priority?" Community leaders, activists, and volunteers continue to fight for their neighborhoods, hosting food drives, organizing street patrols, and trying to build safe spaces for youth. But their work is often undermined by systemic failures, poor funding, neglected infrastructure, and bureaucratic red tape. And while violent crime is not the focus of this video, it's impossible to ignore its impact. In 2023, Chicago reported over 600 homicides, many concentrated in impoverished neighborhoods. Residents live in a constant state of tension, not just from gun violence, but also from the daily anxiety of being priced out, criminalized, or simply forgotten. Police presence is heavy in some areas, but trust is low. Many residents feel law enforcement only shows up after something terrible happens, and even then, there's little sense of justice or follow-up. Others point to decades of racial and economic inequality, saying the roots of today's crisis were planted long ago. Amid the bleakness, however, there are signs of resilience. Urban farms are popping up in food deserts. Formerly incarcerated individuals are starting mentorship programs for at-risk youth. There's still hope in the communities, but it's running thin, and it can't survive without systemic support. Have you ever lived in or visited Chicago? What was your experience like? Do you believe real change is possible in a city so deeply divided? Let us know in the comments. Your perspective matters, and conversations like this are part of the solution. Next, we'll travel to a city where homelessness is so widespread that entire highways have become permanent encampments, and where rising temperatures make street life not just difficult, but deadly. Get ready for Phoenix, Arizona. A city baking under the weight of economic collapse and environmental extremes. Phoenix, once celebrated for its beautiful desert landscapes, golf resorts, and booming tech sector, has become one of the most punishing places to be homeless in America. Here, the sun doesn't just rise, it scorches. Summer temperatures regularly soar above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 degrees Celsius, turning sidewalks into ovens and park benches into burning metal. In 2024, Maricopa County recorded over 650 heat-related deaths. Nearly half of them were people experiencing homelessness. Downtown Phoenix and the area around the Human Services campus have become home to a sprawling encampment simply known as the Zone. Stretching across multiple city blocks, this area is lined with tents, makeshift shelters made from tarps and plywood, and desperate people trying to survive another day under the desert sun. It's not unusual to see men and women pouring bottles of water over their heads to stave off heat stroke, or dogs panting heavily in the shade of shopping carts. The Zone has become ground zero in the city's fight over homelessness. Local residents and business owners complain of unsanitary conditions, rising crime, and declining property values. But for those living there, it's often the only option. Shelters are full, housing is unaffordable, and cooling centers are temporary at best. With rent prices in Phoenix having skyrocketed over 30% since the pandemic, many working-class residents have been forced into the streets. Not because they're lazy or addicted, but because their wages simply can't compete with the housing market. A former construction worker named Ray, living in a tent downtown, explained his story. "I had a back injury, lost my job, and couldn't afford the rent anymore. I went from building homes to living outside one in a matter of months. His situation is not unique. Medical debt, job loss, divorce, or even a single missed paycheck can be enough to send someone into homelessness in today's Phoenix. City officials have tried clearing the encampments, citing health and safety risks. But court rulings and public backlash have made that difficult. In 2023, a judge blocked Phoenix from dismantling the zone unless adequate shelter could be offered to every displaced individual. That ruling exposed a harsh reality. There simply aren't enough beds, rooms, or services to go around. Social workers in Phoenix describe burnout and hopelessness. They hand out water bottles and Narcan, knowing full well that they're offering temporary relief in a permanent crisis. One outreach volunteer said, "We're trying to stop people from dying, not fix the problem, because the system isn't built to solve it." What makes Phoenix particularly tragic is the mix of harsh weather and political gridlock. Debates rage over whether homelessness should be criminalized, whether affordable housing should be expanded, and how resources should be allocated. In the meantime, thousands suffer in silence, caught between the extremes of nature and policy failure. Despite the harshness, some advocates remain hopeful. Nonprofits are pushing for housing-first approaches, offering stable living environments before addressing addiction or employment. But with city budgets stretched thin and federal funding inconsistent, the path forward is uncertain at best. What do you think should be done in cities like Phoenix? Should emergency housing be a national priority? And how should local governments balance public safety with human dignity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Next, we head to Atlanta, Georgia, a city booming with music, culture, and corporate headquarters, but also a city where entire families sleep in cars parked outside Walmarts, and where rapid gentrification is erasing entire communities overnight. Atlanta has long been known as the cultural capital of the American South, home to hip-hop legends, corporate giants like Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, and iconic civil rights landmarks. But beneath the skyline of glass towers and luxury apartments, an alarming number of people are living on the streets, in vehicles, or couch surfing in unstable conditions. By mid-2025, the city's homeless population had surpassed 4,000, with hundreds of families and children included in that count, a statistic both heartbreaking and disturbing. What makes Atlanta's crisis uniquely complex is how rapidly gentrification has reshaped entire neighborhoods. In places like Old Fourth Ward, once home to working-class black families, new high-rises and trendy coffee shops have pushed long-time residents out. Despite the odds, there are glimmers of hope. Organizations like Hope Atlanta and the Atlanta Mission continue to serve thousands, offering meals, medical care, and transitional programs. Faith-based groups have stepped in where the government has lagged, converting church basements into overnight shelters and opening food pantries across the city. But they admit, they're overwhelmed. Atlanta's story is one of contrast, a city full of innovation and prosperity that exists side by side with desperation and neglect. And unless the city confronts the deeper structural issues, housing affordability, systemic inequality, and wage stagnation, the homelessness crisis will only deepen. As we leave Atlanta, consider this. Can a city truly be world-class if its own people have no place to sleep? Up next, we head to Portland, Oregon, once known as a progressive haven, now facing one of the most visible and contentious homelessness crises in the Pacific Northwest. Let's now journey to Portland, Oregon, a city once celebrated for its progressive values, environmental consciousness, and creative counterculture. But in recent years, Portland has become ground zero for one of the most visibly dire homelessness crises in the United States. Streets that once bustled with coffee shops, bike commuters, and food trucks now feature rows of tents, makeshift shelters, and encampments that stretch for blocks. All signs of a system struggling under the weight of unaffordable housing and untreated mental health crises. By early 2025, Portland's official homeless count exceeded 6,300. But advocates suggest the real number could be closer to 10,000 when including the hidden homeless. People couch surfing, sleeping in vehicles, or avoiding shelters out of fear. This staggering number has turned homelessness from a background issue into a daily reality visible in nearly every part of the city, from the downtown core to outer neighborhoods once considered suburban and safe. What's fueling the crisis? A combination of sky-high housing prices, limited affordable units, and a mental health system stretched beyond its limits. Over the past decade, Portland's rental costs have skyrocketed. Average monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment now hovers around $1,700, far outpacing wage growth. For those living paycheck to paycheck, a single medical emergency, job loss, or rent hike can spell disaster. Mental health and substance abuse have also become defining aspects of Portland's homelessness emergency. A significant portion of the city's unhoused population battles untreated schizophrenia, PTSD, or addiction, with few long-term treatment options available. While outreach teams work tirelessly, overwhelmed mental health services, underfunded rehabilitation programs, and a lack of permanent supportive housing mean many remain trapped in a vicious cycle. Tent encampments now line the sidewalks in neighborhoods like Laurelhurst, North Portland, and the areas near the East Bank Esplanade. Local business owners have complained of theft, vandalism, and a sharp drop in foot traffic. Residents worry about safety and sanitation. But the unhoused, in turn, ask, where else can they go? Shelters are consistently full, and strict rules in some facilities, such as curfews, bans on pets, or required sobriety, deter many from using them. The city has responded with a patchwork of policies: emergency housing pods, sanctioned camps, and a controversial plan to ban public camping in designated zones. Yet critics argue these efforts are reactionary, not structural. They claim Portland's leadership has been paralyzed by political infighting and public pressure, resulting in half measures that don't address root causes. One especially divisive proposal involved sweeping large homeless encampments and offering temporary relocation to city-run, safe rest villages. But these sites are under construction delays, lack mental health staffing, and provide limited privacy, leaving many to refuse relocation altogether. Enforcement-only approaches have also sparked protests, with activists saying the city is criminalizing poverty rather than fixing it. Portland's homelessness crisis reveals a painful contradiction: a city known for its compassion and activism now paralyzed by an emergency it can't contain. And it poses a haunting question to residents and leaders alike: how do you uphold values of equity and inclusion when so many are left out in the cold? Next, we head to Seattle, Washington, another West Coast city once praised for its tech boom and progressive policies, now grappling with a growing and highly visible homelessness crisis that challenges its very identity. Now we arrive in Seattle, Washington, a city once heralded as a model of innovation, economic growth, and progressive governance, but now deeply entangled in the same crisis plaguing other major West Coast cities: homelessness. Seattle's skyline reflects wealth and success, with gleaming high-rises home to tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft. But at street level, a different reality unfolds. Tents line the sidewalks, people sleep beneath overpasses and on freeway off-ramps, and families camp in their cars in grocery store parking lots. The contrast between prosperity and poverty here is stark, jarring, and growing harder to ignore with each passing year. In 2025, over 14,000 people in King County, which includes Seattle, are experiencing homelessness on any given night, and more than half of them are living unsheltered. That means no access to emergency shelters, tiny homes, or transitional housing, just open exposure to the city's harsh, rainy winters and increasingly hot summers. The situation has become so dire that some neighborhoods now have semi-permanent encampments, complete with shared kitchens, makeshift fences, and community watch groups, built by necessity, not choice. What makes Seattle's situation especially complex is the rapid influx of wealth brought on by the tech boom. Over the past decade, thousands of high-paying tech jobs have raised the average income in the city, but they've also driven up the cost of housing astronomically. Median home prices are now over $900,000, and average rent exceeds $2,500 per month. For many working-class families, artists, teachers, service workers, and especially people on fixed incomes, keeping up is simply impossible. The rise in evictions is a major driver of homelessness. After pandemic-era eviction protections expired, many residents who had fallen behind on rent were forced out. And while Seattle has made strong investments in affordable housing, the demand still far outpaces the supply. Every year, thousands more people enter homelessness than the city can house, leaving a growing population stuck in limbo. Mental health and substance use are also significant factors. Seattle, like much of the country, has been hit hard by the opioid crisis, with fentanyl becoming the leading cause of overdose deaths. Many people experiencing homelessness struggle with co-occurring disorders, trauma, addiction, and untreated psychiatric conditions. The city has crisis teams and sobering centers, but not nearly enough beds or staff to meet the need. Despite the urgency, public opinion in Seattle is increasingly divided. Some residents demand stronger enforcement, frustrated with encampments near schools and public parks. Others insist on more compassionate, housing-first approaches. The city's policies reflect this tension. In recent years, Seattle has both invested in transitional housing and mental health outreach, and stepped up encampment sweeps, particularly before large public events or tourist seasons. Programs like Just Care, which connects chronically homeless individuals with wraparound services and long-term support, have shown real promise, reducing emergency room visits and police calls while helping people stabilize. Yet these programs are expensive and limited in scope, often reliant on temporary grants. Meanwhile, Seattle's Office of Housing has pledged to build thousands of affordable units, but zoning regulations and neighborhood resistance have slowed progress. A new layer of urgency has emerged in 2025 due to the growing number of families and older adults experiencing homelessness. It's no longer just individuals, it's entire households living in RVs or moving from shelter to shelter, and seniors on Social Security who simply cannot keep up with rising rents. The system wasn't built to support them, and many are falling through the cracks. Seattle remains a city that wants to lead, in sustainability, in equity, in compassion. But the homelessness crisis has become a measure of how far ideals must go to become reality. The challenge now is not only how to get people off the streets, but how to do so in a way that preserves dignity, heals trauma, and addresses the root causes rather than just the symptoms. As we've seen across cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Portland, Seattle, and beyond, America's homelessness crisis is not confined to one coast, one climate, or one political ideology. It is a nationwide emergency with deeply rooted causes: skyrocketing housing costs, stagnating wages, untreated mental illness, substance addiction, and a social safety net stretched too thin. Each city faces unique challenges, but they all share a common truth: that no solution will be effective unless it addresses both the immediate need for shelter and the long-term need for affordable, stable housing. In 2025, it's no longer enough to point fingers or push the problem to another neighborhood. The tent cities we see in parks and on sidewalks are the result of decades of policy failure, a symptom of what happens when housing becomes a luxury instead of a basic human right. These aren't just statistics. They are families, veterans, single mothers, seniors, and working people, living without stability, safety, or hope. But there is still time to change course. Cities that invest in housing-first solutions, mental health services, and economic support for renters are beginning to see results. The question is whether the nation has the political will and collective compassion to follow through, to stop managing homelessness and start ending it. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth reporting on the issues that shape our cities and our future. Let us know in the comments how your city is handling homelessness, and what changes you believe need to happen. Thank you for watching.